getting in here. I'm reading some of the chats right now. I'm going to turn it over if everybody's got their mic muted. I appreciate it. And unmute it when we call you to make your comment or question. There may be some lag. I may not want to interrupt Mike in his presentation, which you should be seeing the slide presentation first page in front of you now. So Mike, anybody, Mike, Steve, any other comments you want to make before we start?
Sounds good.
Mike Moore?
Yes. Okay. Thanks, Tim. Thank you very much. Well, welcome everyone. Appreciate you logging in for the presentation today. My name is Mike Moore. My call sign is KC2NM. I live in Pittsford, and I have been involved in DSTAR for probably 8, maybe 10 years. I'd have to count up the years. And there is not a lot of activity locally on DSTAR, but I am on about every day using my hotspot. Most of the time, I start out by talking to my brother Bob, AL7MH, who lives in the Phoenix area. And I believe he's listening today. I just talked to him on DSTAR. I think he's also in the group. My interest today is not to cover everything about DSTAR, because from my experience with DSTAR, it's a little bit about drinking from a fire hose. There are many aspects of that mode that I have not investigated in terms of types of connections. But my interest is to give people an introduction, and if there is a specific area that you have a question about that I don't have experience with, I've got the old-fashioned mechanism. I'll try and write that down and get back to you with an answer about that just through online research. The second group that I would like to reach today is people who have DSTAR radios and have difficulty programming the radios, because there are, I believe, tens of thousands of places that you can connect to and talk to people on DSTAR, and there are at least a dozen, maybe half a dozen ways to do that. And so if there's something like that you've tried to do in terms of programming, I'd like those questions as well. So let me figure out how to get into this. Okay, here is a little bit by way of introduction. And there's one more point that I failed to make, is that we originally envisioned this RaRa Academy session to be an in-person one, and we were going to hold it at, I believe, the Henrietta Library. And we were going to cover on that day the common 3 digital modes that are active in the amateur community, namely DSTAR, DMR, and Fusion. And those modes are also all used in Rochester, as well as, I believe, P25, but it's not an area that I have any experience with. So given that we're compromised by having to be online, and secondly, we're in a position where almost everybody is looking for things to do because of the things being closed down due to COVID, my suggestion was that instead of trying to do everything in one session, that we split things up and have 3 sessions, one for each of the modes. The screen that I have is 16 by 9, so if hopefully everybody can read that. You may have to scrunch your screen down if it's like a 4:3 aspect ratio, but I tried to use advantage of everything that I had to offer. So today we're going to talk about DSTAR, and DSTAR is an acronym. The name is shown on the screen. It stands for Digital Smart Technologies for Amateur Radio, and DSTAR was one of the first of the three popular platforms for amateur radio, and it was created by the Japanese strictly for use in the Japanese market. The JARL developed that standard, and then ICOM started creating radios for that standard. The DSTAR standard was published in 2001, and it's a pretty dry document, but you can get that on the ARRL website. I have not been able to make much of that. But ICOM started manufacturing radios in 2004. Now, the way it came to the United States, the U.S. sales engineer, Ray Novak, was in Japan for a sales conference. He saw DSTAR and said that he really wanted that for the United States. And ICOM really did not plan on deploying it in the United States, but they agreed to give him some radios and repeaters, and that went to the Atlanta or the Georgia Amateur Radio Club, and they put up the first repeaters and first started using DSTAR. These are the current list of DSTAR compatible transceivers that you can buy today. The 9700 is the very popular VHF, UHF, and above radio that's the companion to the 7300 low band radio. 4100 and 5100 are DSTAR and FM compatible dual band mobile radios. The ID51 is a handheld radio. This is what I have in my hand, and DSTAR is also available for some multi-band radios like the IC7100 and the 9100. Those are low band, and I believe VHF, possibly UHF. I have never seen a 9100. And it said online that the ICOM IC80D is still current. I find that may or may not be true because it's kind of an old radio. And then last on the list, Kenwood has a DSTAR capable radio, the TH74A. Oh, Tim's holding one up. Very good. But those are the transceivers that you can buy today that will operate DSTAR. So I have three examples of connections and one or two connections and one QSO today to demonstrate how they're programmed and how they operate. You'll be able to hear a DSTAR transmission. These are recorded. I recorded these in my shop here using a copy stand and a camera. I have a speaker mic on my ICOM ID51, and I plugged the earphone jack into the computer and use that for the audio, and I have a web camera mounted on the copy stand so that you can see the faceplate. On the right hand picture is my Zumspot, and that is a multi-protocol hotspot, and that's upstairs in my kitchen. It's a small box with a Raspberry Pi Zero and a Zumspot modem that sits on the top of the Raspberry Pi. And there are a few boards like this that you can buy. You can buy the board and put it together yourself, or you can buy a package. The most convenient place that I have found to buy those devices is either HRO or Gigaparts. Others may sell it, but I think HRO was the first to offer these things for general sale. So Jim McLaughlin built this board, and he has a long history of boards of this type. And then he collaborated with a fellow, John Naylor, K4KLX or G4KLX, who wrote the software suite that's widely used for DSTAR and DMR and Fusion. I've met both of these guys on a few occasions. You'll find them at Dayton, and most recently, both Jim and Jonathan were at the Orlando Hamcation. But the Raspberry Pi runs Linux, and there is an interface that runs on top of Linux for the G4KLX software, and we'll see that in a minute. But it is an operator's interface called PiStar, and that was written by Andy Taylor, and his call sign is up there. And the box that I have in the kitchen runs on Wi-Fi. And then the radios themselves have a command set that will allow you to connect your hotspot through the internet to the host that you're going to talk to people on. And we'll see the front panel screen in a few minutes. Tim, are you getting any questions? Should I stop for any reason? Tim PAY?
No questions yet that I can see on the chat room. I'm not sure how the raised hand, somebody said they do have the raised hand, whether that'll show up in the chat room or not. Do you know, Brian?
It shows up in the participant list. I haven't seen any yet.
All right, you watch that. I'll watch the chat room. Thank you.
We do have one.
We do. Okay, go ahead.
Just a raised hand.
Bo here, N1MJD, probably with the dumbest question asked today. Do you need a DMR radio to transmit through a Pi or a Zumspot or whatever? I hope that came through.
Yes, you do. Okay, you said the word DMR, but I think you meant DSTAR. But the answer is yes, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But there, of the various protocols, the technical aspect of DSTAR, DMR, and the Fusion, they use an encoding scheme to compress the bandwidth of your voice statement, or your voice a little bit for transmission. And of all of the three, DSTAR was designed for using the minimum bandwidth. So the compression that they use in DSTAR is fairly small. And the chip that they use can be the same chip, but it selects a different algorithm for DSTAR, DMR, and Fusion. Now, having said that, you ask about talking over the air. You do need a radio, but I do have a device that I'm going to demonstrate that will allow you to talk on the DSTAR network without a radio. Did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Thank you very much. Would probably be asked today, and thank you. And I'm calling in from Krogan, New York. I am a RaRa member, and the call sign is N1MJD. Thank you very much, and this is a great presentation you're doing.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Mike,
so,
we have another,
go ahead.
We have another question from Dan KD2OWW if he wants to open his mic and ask it.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's appropriate now, Mike, but my question was around, I know that there's like 30 Charlie and so forth on DSTAR are pretty popular channels, but I'm wondering, would your presentation cover some of the more active channels that hams are generally gravitating towards, and potentially also any nets that might be available?
What I'm going to do is show where you can find the list of nets and the list of reflectors. So in terms of what is most active, you've hit on the one that's the most active, 30 Charlie, and reflector 1 alpha, I think, is very active. And beyond that, it would be a matter of looking through the list of reflectors and finding one in an area that you're interested in. For example, my brother lives in Phoenix, and there's a reflector in Arizona that all of the repeaters are well, not all, but many repeaters are connected to. So I gravitate to that because of calling my brother, and I've gotten to know some of the guys that he's friends with. Another example of a reflector is the California Papa system. I don't have a lot of personal experience with that, but it's a very widely used repeater system in California. So if you had an interest in that, that would be an example of where you might go. So that part of the discussion, the location of repeaters and that type and reflectors, is going to occur a little bit later. But for now, if you can see my mouse scrolling around this board, that is the Zumspot. And I'm going to back up a slide. That antenna is on top of this box, and I actually bought all of those pieces and drilled the box. But inside of there is the Raspberry Pi, and this is the antenna for the radio receiver. The Wi-Fi is inside the box as well as the computer, and then this cable here is the power that's coming from this USB power supply box. So that's a very small little box. Now I should add this. Well, I will make a comment about why I use this in a couple of minutes. So I'm going to advance to. I got lost here. Okay, this is the Zumspot control panel. And this is actually running on that Raspberry Pi. And this is how you configure the hotspot. You enter things like your call sign. You enter things like your Wi-Fi password, your password for the spot. And then this runs on the hotspot. You don't have to watch this. In other words, I log into this using a browser on one of my workstations by entering the IP address of the hotspot, and this is what I see. But it does keep a list of all of the stations that it hears, and what we see on the hotspot is the date and the time, and this thing scrolls up as time goes by. Here is my brother's call sign along with the tag that he sends with his transmission, which is his name, Bob. This is the code that his radio sent for this conversation. And then this is how he got to me. This call sign AL7MHB is the call sign of his hotspot. And then he's routing through reflector 9 Delta. And we'll maybe talk a little bit about what these numbers represent. But these are all of the things that the hotspot has heard. And many of these it heard over the internet. In other words, these are not things that it picked up in my kitchen. These are some of the things that came over the internet. One thing that's kind of cute, the slide has a picture on it. But if you are on the browser on the hotspot live, if you click on one of these call signs, it will bring up the data block from QRZ.com. So you can see a guy's picture. You can learn a lot about his station just by clicking there. So this is the Zumspot control panel, and this is a very, very popular usage. Like many people's hotspots are using this the PyStar software. Some other things before we leave it here. This line here shows the reflector that we're linked to, and this is the mode. And reflector 9 delta, we will talk about where to find that, but it's one of, you know, at least hundreds. I don't think there's thousands, but there are hundreds of places like this you can connect to. And then this is a status display that talks about the modes that I'm able to use on the hotspot. We probably, unless there's a question, we won't describe each of these.
Mike,
But yes.
Two things. You might want to, your pointer there is very small. As we practice, do you want to do that outlining mode?
Yeah. Oh, that's a good idea.
And also,
annotate. Yes. Thank you, Tim. Thank
We
you.
have a question from Harry, KA2NM, if he'd like to open his mic and ask it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I have a 9700, and I have made DSTAR connections through a couple of the local VHF or UHF repeaters that are close enough to me to get into. But the radio also has a terminal mode, and the radio is connected to the internet, and I have found various videos describing how to use it, but they only talk about like one particular node that you can connect to. And it seems like in addition to the name, it also needs a very specific IP address that is entered. And of course, I can get into that one and it works, but how do I get into other reflectors and the like using terminal mode rather than a repeater, so that if I don't have good access to a repeater, I can do it using the radio's direct internet connection?
Thanks, Harry. The quick answer is I don't really know, but I wrote down the 9700 terminal node. I've heard that spoken about. I'll have to get back to you on that. You have anything else, Tim?
Rich has got another question. Rich, WA2CCD. WA2CCD, unmute your mic and ask your question.
Hello, I'm here.
Oh,
Can I talk to somebody else's hotspot with my handheld?
Generally speaking, you can. There is a switch in the hotspot that I have seen. It's something like use my call sign, and I believe it has to be explicitly turned on for you to be able to do that.
The hotspot has to be turned on to do that?
Yes.
Or the radio?
The hotspot.
Okay, thank you.
So this is the annotate. I'm drawing a circle around this field on the screen. Can you see that, Tim?
yes.
Okay, so what this field is the APRS host. And the DSTAR radios they don't all have the receiver embedded in, but they have the capability to receive data from a GPS and transmit it in the packets of data going into the radio. And you configure the hotspot to a server that is local to your part of the country. This is in New England. And what this does is data from the GPS that's built into this radio is sent to that server, and then it's put on APRS.FI. This they call this DPRS for Digital Position Reporting System, but there is an interface to the APRS network, which every few transmissions you make, the data will go out on the APRS network. got to find my mouse here. I was holding that pencil with it. Oh, here we go. Well, I have to let go, but I guess, okay. That was good to learn. So in addition to the hotspot that I have, here are a couple of other examples. The DVAP has been around for quite a long time, and that is a USB device that you would plug into a computer, and it operates in a manner similar to the Zumspot that I have. DV4 Mini is a similar kind of thing. It's shown on the right, and I have not seen those guys at Dayton for a year, and I haven't seen them at the Hamcation, so I'm not sure of their status. This is probably an older product. The OpenSpot was very highly featured at Orlando, and that is a standalone type of thing. It has its own computer, unlike the Zumspot, where I had to put my own software into the box and build it up. The OpenSpot comes from the factory standalone, and you configure the network parameters in that box, and it's quite a nicer package, although at a higher price. Another thing that the newer devices have is well, let me back up. All of the devices that we're talking about in terms of hotspots, as far as I know, will work with both all three DMR, Fusion, and DSTAR, except for the DVAP. That's a pretty old device, but the modern hotspots will use all three. What's unique about the OpenSpot is that it does built-in transcoding, and so it has the capability to convert DSTAR to DMR format or Fusion format. Now, I am making these statements from what I've read about this device, because I don't personally have one, but I know Steve has one, so we'll probably get some testimony about that when he does his portion. But a lot of the guys that I talk to are very high on the OpenSpot. Just some of the differences: the Zumspot, you can buy those for like $125. I think that the OpenSpot is up between $200 and $300. So it's the kind of thing where you may be getting what you pay for. So there are a lot of hotspots. The other option is to talk through a repeater. And where I live, if I go to my back porch, I can get into the W2RITB repeater. I'm a little bit blocked from that repeater by the hill at Locust Hill Country Club, but I can, if I'm out in my neighborhood walking around, I can talk to a DSTAR directly through the repeater. This picture that's shown is of the KB2VZS repeater in Fairport, and I cannot reach that from my house in a handheld due to the ridge that is on Route 64. But this is a picture of a repeater. What's shown there is actually an ICOM repeater with a power supply on the bottom, the repeater controller in the second rack up. There's a duplexer and the wireless router above that, and then the radios for the ICOM repeater are in the silver box at the top. And then to the right is the antenna and the building in which it's located. That's located on Baker Hill. But for me, the hotspot from inside the house works best, because right now I'm in the basement, and it works well from the basement wherever I am. But if I'm out walking in the neighborhood, I'll use the repeater at W2RIT. People a lot of times ask about outside antennas on a hotspot. I actually have 2 hotspots. One uses a Yaesu radio running 5 watts, and that works quite well, but that's a different piece of hardware than the little Zumspot. The Zumspot uses a small analog devices radio chip with no filtering, so it would not be proper to use that on an outside antenna, and that device only runs 10 milliwatts. So couple ways to get in. You can use the hotspot in your house or the repeaters, and we're going to have an almost complete list of local repeaters later on in the presentation. This is a little bit about what DSTAR is. I mean, just some bullet points. In the DSTAR radio, your microphone speech amplifier runs into an A to D converter, so you have digital audio similar to what you might find, say, in your computer coming out of the sound card. And then the digital audio from the A to D converter goes into a vocoder, which is specific to the DSTAR format. And that vocoder was designed to minimize and compress the bandwidth of your speech signal to the minimum, and which was one of their design goals. So added to that is data which describes the source and the destination and the routing information. We're going to talk a little bit about what that means, but it's all based on amateur radio call signs. And then there's also a low-speed text channel, which you can actually use for keyboard-to-keyboard communications. And that data is combined together with error correction and then sent through a, I believe, I always say this wrong, it's a GMSK modem. It's a digital modem that takes the data and turns it into the beeps and boops that go out over the analog radio. And when you listen to any of these signals, which is very commonly done on the RIT repeater, it sounds really like a bunch of noise. In fact, a lot of people mistaken the DSTAR transmissions for noise. So in DSTAR, when you are talking to someone, you make a connection from your host to the host that they are listening to, and that's typically over the internet. So in the examples today, I will be making a transmission from my radio to the hotspot that you saw pictured above. And 2 of those connections are just going to be one hop. In one case, I'm going to ask the hotspot if he's busy, and he's going to reply. And in the next case, I'm going to ask for an echo from the hotspot, and I'll get that. And in the third case, I'm actually have a recording of a QSO. So the data goes from the radio into the host to the internet. And the way that that's done is through 4 parameters. There's my, which is my call sign. There's your, which is the call sign that I want to talk to. And then there's repeater 1 and repeater 2. And repeater 1 is actually the host that I am talking to on the radio, and repeater 2 is how it sends the data out over the internet. So we're going to go through several examples of that, but typically for the conversations that I'm going to do today, we're using a newer version of addressing called DR mode, and in that mode, you hold the 2 of the addresses fixed, and you only vary the call sign of the your call field to make a connection. And it's a little confusing, but hopefully we can look at these transmissions a couple times and understand how they vary. Okay, there I kind of reiterate what I just said, but the 4 parameters that we're going to use is going to be and that's always going to be KC2NM. In my radio, I have some other call signs programmed so that I can share my program with other people. And if you have a radio that you're sharing, you can actually switch the my call field, but I never do that, and most of us will not do that because we have our own radios. The your call is the one that changes most often. But most of the time it's set to the 6 characters CQ, 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 and that tells the path that you're talking to send that transmission over the connection that you've established. And then RPT1 and RPT2, the repeater 1 is going to be KC2NM space B. And that is the call sign that's burned into the hotspot up in my kitchen. Most of the time, the repeater 2 is going to be KC2NM space G. And what that means is to send the data out over the internet, over the Wi-Fi. And we are going to program the radio to send the call sign, where to make the connection, and that is where the data is going to go. So to the first example, the QSO example 1 is a very, very simple one. I'm going to ask for the status of the Zumspot. And so what I have done is my call is set to my call sign. Your call sign is set to 7 spaces and then an I, which tells the hotspot I'm asking for his information. And then repeater 1 is set to KC2NM space B, which my hotspot in the kitchen is going to respond to that. The repeater 2 is blanked because it's only going to go to the hotspot itself. It's not going to go out over the internet. In truth, I found that it is set to the gateway, so it's kind of redundant. You'll see that on the log, but it does not have to be. So these are pictures from the ICOM programming software. These are the values that I'm going to use to that I've put in my software to send this request that I'm going to make. The one that I'm using, I have actually 2 hotspots here in the house. One is my base, and that is a Raspberry Pi connected to an older DVR PTR modem and a Yaesu dual band radio, which is permanently in my house. And there's the frequency, and these are the parameters. My mobile hotspot, which I am programmed to talk to, is the Zumspot, which sometimes is in my car connected to a telephone, but today is in the kitchen. And these are different frequencies, and then a different repeater call sign, just so I can have them both existing in the house. So this is how I have my radio programmed. And then this value right here, status, status, I forgot to pick up the, this happened to, okay, I pick up the pencil, and this is what I'm going to send over the radio. Oh, okay, well, I guess that's not going to work for me. Pretend that didn't happen. So anyway, I'll use with the pointer, this status is what I'm going to use, the I command. And I should say this, that the names that you see in the programming software, those are going to appear on the radio. So when we actually go to the radio, you're going to see in the from field, the name is going to be KC2NM base, but when I make a transmission, it's going to send a my of KC2NM. Repeater 1 is going to be this string, and repeater 2 will be that string.
Mike?
Yep.
Dave, KD2RAF has a question about the format. Dave, unmute your mic, please, and ask the question.
Yeah, Mike, I was wondering if the format was the same on the 7100 unit as you're showing us now.
I believe that it is, Dave. I'm not familiar with the 7100, but I believe that it's the standard DSTAR format.
Okay, thank you.
And, you know, let me say one more thing. The radios come shipped with most of the world's information inside the radio. The world doesn't know about my little hotspot, so I had to do that piece of it. But I guess what I was going to say is, in terms of the format, you have a couple of options. Number one option is you can transfer the contents of the radio into your programming software and then inspect it to make what you're going to add look like what was shipped with it. And secondly, updates to the software. For example, if they change a repeater or they add a repeater or somebody new comes on the air, that information can be downloaded from a website called DSTARinfo.com. There'll be links to that later. And that new information, you tell it what radio you have, and you will download the radio information in a CSV file that is in the format for your radio. So there's only a handful and a half of radios. So the data is available in the format for your radio. So this is my radio, and this is not live. This is going to be a movie. But what you see on the radio, I wish I could get that pencil back. Let me try one more time. Huh. Let me see what this does. Yeah, so that CQ in the to field, this is the name of the data point from the radio that I uploaded. The value that it's going to send is this character string, which is CQ, CQ, CQ. And then from is the hotspot that I'm going to talk through. And the hotspot name is KC2NM base, which is one of those selections on the prior field. And that parameter that's stored in there, this is the frequency 446.150, one of the simplex frequencies on 440. And this is my call. Now let me back up. This is repeater 1. This is who it's going to talk to, which is KC2NM space B. So I'm going to go back down and pick up the mouse, and we'll play this a couple of times. What you're going to see is the radio, using the buttons on the speaker mic, is going to change the memory location in the to field, which is highlighted here. And it's going to go up to the information request, make the request, we'll hear the result, and then come back to CQ. Transmit. So what I did is, using the buttons on the speaker mic in the to field, go up from CQ to status, make a transmission, and then come back to CQ. And CQ is where I talk to people. The other memory locations is where I connect to people. And we'll see more examples of that. And the words not linked come into the message field. That is almost always corrupted in some fashion. But the words not linked, that digital voice which said those words, is stored in the hotspot. So we're going to go up to the hotspot and make a request. So that was a whole example of a DSTAR request for status, and then the reply came back. So what I actually did is use the buttons on the speaker mic, and it was a little cumbersome because the wire that took the audio back for recording in the computer is also in there. And the other thing you'll notice is that I didn't identify with my voice call sign. DSTAR is one of the unique modes in that the FCC call sign is part of every data transmission. Most of the time we do identify just because we're used to doing that when we talk to each other, but it's not necessary to separately make a voice identification because that's part of every transmission. And normally in a QSO, you will see the call sign and name of the person that you're speaking to in this line. You'll notice that I also have this status here, a little bit about what that means. That means I was super low power. This is just a very minimal amount of power that I use here in the house, and the radios last a long time. The other thing that you might have noticed in the video is, let me grab my drawer again here. This block here was flashing, and what that is the indicator from the GPS receiver, because I couldn't pick up GPS in the basement, so it keeps flashing trying to find home. But if we were outside and the GPS receiver located in the top of the radio had a lock, when I transmitted, you would see me appear on the APRS map. Tim, do you have any questions about this simple example? So what we did is we showed the portion of the programming radio that the radio used to make that request. We showed a demonstration of the request and then heard the reply from the hotspot. Secondly, this is the faceplate from the hotspot. Normally you wouldn't look at this because, you know, it's kind of a standalone kind of thing, and except for the fact that this shows a U instead of an I because I put up the wrong slide. This would be what you would see during that operation if you were watching the hotspot. The hotspot also keeps a log of activity, and this is a picture of the log from that transmission. The hotspot received my call sign, and it decoded this as an info request, and then this shows the hotspot replying to, yeah, right here. To the radio, and along with this you see in the log various flags and a bit error rate, how long the transmission took, and what have you. but this is one thing that you also will receive if you're looking at the faceplate. It's helpful in debugging. An example of where I use this, I had a difficult time getting the Pi-Star software to operate when I first got Pi-Star, and it turned out to be a very simple thing, but I wound up transferring these logs back and forth to another ham to try to get some help, and the help was this. Simplex to the hotspot, I was identifying my transmission as simplex, and that was throwing an error because the hotspot expects to be thought of as not a simplex transmitter, but a repeater with an offset of 0. So it wasn't recognizing the fact that it was being addressed because of that. And that's a case where this log can be helpful. So the second example that we're going to do is called an echo request. And again, this is a simplex kind of thing where you'll make a voice transmission. The hotspot will record your digital audio and then replay it back to you. And this is good for debugging or determining what your excuse me, need a cough switch, signal quality is. And again, my call is same as before, KC2NM. Your call is 7 spaces and an E. This is incorrect. This should say echo request, this line right here. Repeater 1 is KC2NM space B, which says Zumspot, I'm talking to you. And this won't go out to the gateway, so it does not need to be set in repeater 2.
Mike?
Yeah.
John NV2K has made some queries about not linked. Your comment about being linked and unlinked. What was it referring to? He may want to phrase it differently. Go ahead, John.
Okay, thank you, Mike. When in the last demonstration, when the radio said not linked, what was it that was not linked? What was it referring to there?
So when you're in a QSO, John, with someone, you are linked to them. And, you know, I probably should say that there are many other mechanisms for talking to people, but the one that I think is most common and the one that I always use is when I link my host, whether it's the hotspot or a repeater, to another host that is transmitting to the station that I want to talk to. So in the final example, you're going to see me link to reflector 9 Charlie. And once I'm successfully linked, I can talk all day using just the call sign CQ, and my transmission will go over that established link. The command that we just executed for status is really, are you linked? And so I sent the I to the hotspot, the I character or the status request. The hotspot replied, not linked, which tells me that that it's not linked to somebody. So if I send CQ, it's not going to go on the internet to somebody else. Where you might use this kind of thing is I might get in the car and start driving up Clover Street, and I'm going to make a call on the W2RIT repeater. Well, I don't know if it's linked or not. I don't know if another ham has left it linked to a host. So I don't want to immediately just send CQ because it might go to a place that, you know, I don't know where it's going to go. So it could, so the prior person may have left the repeater linked to, say, reflector 30 Charlie, for example. And I don't want to talk on reflector 30 Charlie. So I'll use that command or the status command, send it to RIT, and if it comes back to me and says linked, then what I might do is use the word CQ and say, this is KC2NM. Is anybody using W2RITB? And I would wait for a reply. And then what I might do at that point, say, this is KC2NM unlinking W2RITB. And I would send the, let me get my pencil again here. I would send the, uh-oh, I didn't have it there. Oops. I would send the U command to unlink.
Okay.
And then the repeater would say, W2RIT not linked. So that tells me that it's not linked. And then I would go through and link the repeater to the station I wanted to talk to. So that was kind of long-winded. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you, John. So so the next command, and again, this is just going to be local to the hotspot, is I'm going to.
All right, got another question from Gary Perkins, K2OU.
Go ahead, Gary.
Good morning. Thank you for having this really great meeting here. When I try to program, I'm using my ID51 with a hotspot, a Zumspot, matter of fact, and I have no problem programming and it works just fine. What I haven't been able to do, and I'm down in Lakeland, Florida, we don't really have a DSTAR repeater here.
Yep.
Is I haven't figured out the difference. If I did have a local repeater here and I wanted to program it in order that I could use that as like a standalone repeater, if you will. I would understand if I put the one call sign in for the repeater itself, and then if I was trying to link somewhere else, I can understand how to do that. But if I wanted to talk just locally on that repeater, what would be the difference in the way I program it?
Okay, so Gary, the in your call, okay, and the my call field would be your call sign. In other words, that's pretty much always true. That's who you are in my call. If you wanted to talk locally, what you would do is put the string CQ, CQ, CQ in your call, which means you want to talk to everyone. Reflector 1 would be the call sign of the repeater that you want to talk to people through, and reflector 2 would be blank.
Okay.
So
right, that makes sense, Mike. Thank you. That makes more sense. I couldn't figure it out before. I didn't know if I needed to put the repeater call sign that I'm trying to work in both slots. But after your explanation about using the Zumspot and not having to put in the second call, that makes sense to me. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So in the next example, we're going to have an echo voice request through the hotspot, and you know, I don't know if I think I may have skipped a slide here. So yeah, I did 2 slides. I got lost with my pencil looking. So in this case, we're going to have my call, as it always is, KC2NM. Your call is 7 spaces and an E. Repeater 1 is KC2NM space B, which is the Zumspot call sign. And it's going to be blank in repeater 2 because there's no need to go out over the gateway. So these are the 4 key parameters, and this is how they're shown in my programming software for the ID51. And we're going to use for the Zumspot, it's going to be this selection, number 1. That line is going to be selected in the from field. And on the radio, the 2 field is going to have, we're going to climb up to number 4, which is the echo command. And next is the little movie. So it would have been a better display if I had this now set to CQ and then went up to the E, but that's something I could have done better. So we'll just play it. Oh, I did. Oh, yay me.
This is KC2NM into the Echo server. This is KC2NM into the Echo server.
So that's pretty much it. I went up and I made my voice request, and it recorded it and sent it back to me. And you would use that with a hotspot or a repeater to answer the question, gee, I wonder how I'm getting in. And this is what it appears to be on the faceplate. If you look at that, and this, I said repeater 2 was blank. That I mistakenly had that programmed, but that is not necessary for this to operate. And Gary, in the case that we just talked about, if I were on 444.8 trying to talk to the KB2VZS repeater, instead of this field being KC2NM space B, it would be KB2VZS space B.
That makes sense. Thank you very much, Mike.
Yep, and this is the log that that is returned by the hotspot. And again, this is something that you very rarely use, but many times you'll get, if you've got something programmed wrong, you'll get a line in here saying that a particular field is not understood. So it will show you error messages in your programming in this field. What I always do in the programming area is I'll get something working, and from the programming software you can export the data into a CSV file, and then take the CSV file and edit that and get the pieces that you may need out of the CSV, and then replicate that with the new data of what you want to put in there. So in the next example, I'm going to contact my brother, Bob, who's listening here on the class this morning, and I'm going to have a conversation with him, a short conversation. So in this case, we have my call is set to KC2NM, as it has been, and RPT1 is going to be set to KC2NM space B, which is the call sign of my Zumspot, and then repeater 2 is going to be set to KC2NM space G, which is the internet gateway on my hotspot. So what's going to be different here, though, is there are going to be 3 sets of programming commands that we're going to use. The first one will be the first transmission, and what this will do is tell the gateway to connect to reflector 9 Charlie. Reflector 9 Charlie is one of hundreds of reflectors out there, and we'll see from the list a little bit later. This is dedicated to interconnection of repeaters in Arizona, and it probably has a dozen repeaters connected to it throughout the state. And when we talk on this reflector, we're going to be talking on all of those connected repeaters. And And the way that we connect to that is through this string, which is REF009 Charlie. And the L command tells the hotspot and the DSTAR software, the DCS software, that's an acronym for the type of connection that this is going to be, to link. So what will happen is when we send this call sign, if we're successful, the request will go out over the internet to Reflector 9 Charlie, and Reflector 9 Charlie is software running in a data center someplace into which all of myself as well as all of those repeaters are going to be connected. So we'll send this call sign, this transmission one time, and then the hotspot will send back the string connected to Reflector 0009 or 009 Charlie. Once we receive that, we're going to switch memory channels in the to field. Because we're connected, we're going to make all of our conversation using all of the same parameters, except for the your field is going to be set to CQ, CQ, CQ. We'll see that on the radio, and my brother and I will talk back and forth a few times. And then when we're done, we're going to send another string, a control string, to close the connection. And that's going to be all of the data that we've sent before, including repeater 1, repeater 2. And then in the your field is the letter 7 spaces and a U. That tells the network, I'm done, and break that connection. And after that time, will be unlinked. So it's a matter of linking, talk, 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 unlink. In the programming software, this is the same as before. In the from field, we're going to use the same program location. Then, to make the connection, we're going to use line 18 in the to field, which I'm going to switch that using the buttons on the microphone. We're going to get the signal that says that we're linked. Then we're going to switch back to memory location 1, where the tag is CQ and the string is CQ, CQ, CQ. We'll have our conversation using those settings, and then we'll switch down to unlinked. And when we're done. So here we go. Unlike a live transmission, I've played it before. It works.
Link to REF009 Charlie.
AL7MH KC2NM.
Hi, Mike. KC2NM, AL7MH.
Yeah, hello, Bob. Well, I'm kind of redoing the video we did before because I discovered how to frame my control screen in the camera.
Oh, very good. Very good. So, let's see. Today is Wednesday? Yeah, today's Wednesday. So you got a few days, right?
Yeah, we're going to have a dry run tonight. And I got my MacBook back today, so I figure I'm going to use those to clean up the video before I put them into the presentation.
Roger, Roger. What time is it again?
10 until noon on Saturday.
would be 7 p.m. until 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. You gonna send me an invitation?
Yeah, I'll figure out how to do that. We're supposed to have a dry run tonight, although I have to check on the time.
Roger on that. I tried to get the group down here together for 2:30 virtual coffee and black, but I hadn't heard back from anyone, so I simply won't do that.
Well, I've been reading the mail on some of the reflectors, Reflector 30C, listened to a couple QSOs, and there's a universal theme that is espoused.
Oh, and what would that be?
My wife is stir crazy.
Well, you know, here we're hanging in pretty well, I'd say. Pretty well. We're hanging in pretty well, I'd say. Pretty well. You know what's going on.
Yeah, there were a couple of dropouts on that last transmission.
You know what's going on. Yeah, okay. Well, I don't think I had my hand on the mic, but I could have. But yeah, we're getting ready to take off and get some things out of the motorhome that we should have.
Have you put away your motorhome yet?
Absolutely. We got it home Saturday afternoon, and then all morning and a little bit of the afternoon on Sunday, we did a what I term a deep decommissioning.
Well, hopefully this condition that we're in will pass, and you'll have an opportunity to get it back out sometime. Although I started to say before cold weather, but your problem is hot weather.
Yeah, Roger. I think that the best case scenario is that we will be able to honor our 1 month reservation on the beach in just the middle of September.
Well, that would be nice. Okay, well, I'll let you get to it, and thanks for being a guinea pig here for my QSO.
Roger, 73, KC2NM, AL7MH.
73 Bob, AL7MH, KC2NM. So that was a complete QSO. We went through 3 memory settings. There was the linking. There was the conversation with CQ in the your field, and then we unlinked using the U command. And you know, that was the whole conversation. I should mention that that many times there are repeaters that are permanently linked, or that link by default. There's all kinds of operations that are up to the repeater owner. In Arizona, most of the repeaters are always linked to Reflector 9 Charlie. So whenever you talk on one of them, you're talking to everyone on Reflector 9 Charlie. And that's what they have set up in Arizona. Are there any questions or
a desire to see a piece of that again?
Hey, Mike, what did you do to unlink at the end? I missed that.
Okay, the unlink command is using the dial, moved to memory location 2. And what that did is sent this string where my call is okay, my repeater 1, repeater 2 stayed the same the whole time. It's just in the your field, which is one of the fields in the radio, I sent 7 spaces and a U, which is the command to unlink.
And if you forget to unlink, does that leave that channel open for an extended period of time?
It could be either, Scott. Some repeater operators will dump an unused link. Some repeater operators, whenever nobody else is linked, it will form a link. For example, KD2HVC, which is located in Stanley, that's one of the SciArc repeaters. I believe that by default, that repeater stays linked to the northeast repeater reflector. So if you go to that repeater, you have to unlink it if you want to make your own connection. And then you would make your call, you would have your QSO, and you may or may not unlink. But these are pretty much all Linux boxes. So after a time period, it would find a link that's left open, close it, and then link back up to, I think it's 10B, or it's whatever reflector is northeast repeaters.
So there's essentially a timeout value someplace.
It's, I believe, a cron job.
Yeah. Who's controlling the timeout? Which repeater is controlling it? The one that you initiated on, or is it any one of them?
Well, for example, if I could put something in my hotspot to automatically disconnect it if you want, say in the case of let's say W2RIT, he could have something in his Raspberry Pi that would do that. I can tell you that on KB2VZS, there's nothing like that. If you link a repeater, it stays, the link stays until somebody unlinks it.
So it sounds like somebody along the train is going to have the shortest timeout, and they're going to give up the ghost, and then it's done.
Yeah, that could be. Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
All right, Mike, we've got a question from Dennis, AC2XI. Dennis, open up your mic, please.
Hi, Mike. Quick question on just listening. If you wanted simply to listen to a reflector, do you link and listen and then unlink, or is there some other process you go through there?
No, Dennis, that's what you would do. You would link and just listen and then unlink. So, for example, I recorded quite a bit of Reflector 30C in preparing for this demonstration. And yeah, I didn't save any of it because they tended all to be rag chews. And so to break in on a conversation, while I could have done that, most of the conversations lasted for a much longer time. For example, I gave out my call on Reflector C, and I talked to a woman in Quartzsite, Arizona, and she was driving to Phoenix, and I wound up talking to her for probably 20 minutes, and this is after she had a QSO with a fellow in what is it that's on the southwest coast of the UK? Wales. It was a gentleman in Wales, and he was an avionics technician for British Airways. So, I mean, their conversation was quite interesting, but it went on for an hour. So it really wasn't something that that it would be appropriate to put out over this class. That's why I called my brother. I figured, well, you know, he's my brother. I can say, hey, I want to talk to you for 30 seconds, then we're done. Did that answer your question? You can just go listen. Yep.
Yep, it did. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate
Welcome. So that was the QSO. And then this is what oh, this is the wrong slide that was supposed to be in another location. But you know, you can see, for example, when you watch the faceplate, you will see the linking command, you'll see the CQ command for a while, and then you'll see the U command. And this is the QSO log. So this first transmission is when I said in your call sign REF009 Delta link, and we actually talked on Charlie, but when my brother and I did it the first time, he was actually on reflector 9D. And so this is our connection. And then this went on for several minutes where we were just talking.
Mike, Bob's got another comment from, and so does Cedric.
Okay.
Bob first, go ahead, make your point.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Hey, Mike, you might mention the need to register your call sign to be able to pass through the gateway. That's a first step that we all did years and years ago. I can't even remember how we did that, but until you register with some sort of authority, your call sign will not pass through the gateway.
Well, okay, everybody has a brother, right? So you're going to know what I say. As usual, my brother's wrong. No. So in order to use the original call sign routing provided by ICOM, it requires you to register with a repeater in the system. And if you start to use DSTAR, there's certainly nothing wrong with registering your call sign, and you can do that with your local repeater. I've approved a lot of people on KB2VZS, and now they do more of a blanket registration at DSTARinfo.com, where we're going to show that that website in a minute. But all of the modern systems are based upon the G4KLX software, and I'm 90% certain it's not required to register to use the modern software. But you know, I'm certainly registered, and I think most people do register. I'll just show this in passing. When we had this QSO the first time, Bob was driving back from Tupelo back to Phoenix in his motorhome. This is last week, someday, probably the date shown here. This is the April 4th. But this is typical of the DPRS to APRS.FI. In this case, he was beaconing. But if you're just in a QSO, your position packets go out when you make a transmission.
Mike?
Yes.
All right, Cedric is next, WA2FTV, and then Dave, RAF, another question. So take
All right,
Cedric first.
Go ahead, Cedric.
Mike, I'm just curious if ARRL has any publications that go into this. For a newbie on DSTAR, this is overwhelming almost.
Well, you're right. You are right, Cedric. It's kind of like drinking from a fire hose. I know that ARRL has a book for digital communications, but I'm going to go look at that book and try to give you some advice on that. But there are some websites there are two websites. There's DSTARinfo.com and DSTARusers.org. That those links are in the presentation. On those web pages are presentations from the Georgia DSTAR Club, and that can be very helpful. And like everything else these days, there's an awful lot on YouTube available as well. But your question about the ARRL, I'll see what they have. I know they have books, but how current are they? That's a question. Is that good?
That's good. As far as that DSTAR.info, is there a hyphen between the D and the S in DSTAR?
No, and that link will be in the presentation, but it's one word, DSTARinfo.com.
Okay, thank you.
And DSTARusers.org.
Okay.
And
Thank
who's
you.
next? Dave?
Mike?
Yeah, Dave, RAF.
Yeah, hi, Dave.
Good morning again, Mike. So I only see 4 DSTAR repeaters in the area: Squaw Island, the DCAP, the LARC, the W2RIT hotspot. Is that correct, or is there more?
No, there are more. And I didn't add these to the presentation, but I will before I send it out, because Steve CNF pointed out that there are a few in Wayne County that we should add to the list. And some of these repeaters are not dedicated DSTAR machines. For example, the RIT repeater is multi-protocol. It does DSTAR, it does DMR, and it could do fusion. I don't know if they have that enabled. And it also does analog. So that's quite versatile. From where you live, I would say that your best shot is going to be to RIT for DSTAR, or a hotspot. And you know, the question about terminal mode, do you know if your radio has terminal mode, Dave?
I do not know that. I'm not familiar with that side of the radio at all. As a matter of fact, this is all new to me. I'm very novice to it, so I've always wanted to read up on it, but never had several other things going at the same time, so I never did.
If you don't if you don't mind, Bob, AL7MH, I have a question for you, because you have a 7100, which is what Dave has. Do you know if it offers terminal mode?
Do not think that it does. I think that came after the fact, but I can't say for sure.
Yeah. Okay. That's the
I
97.
I think that came in HT in the say the ID51A plus, or one of those.
What we're talking about, everyone else that's listening, terminal mode, I believe, allows the radio to connect directly to the internet, so that you can talk on the DSTAR network without a repeater and without a separate hotspot. You can talk directly. So, for example, I believe that my dream radio, which is going to be the IC705, it has all of that kind of stuff. You can talk on that radio through a repeater or a hotspot, or if you have a Wi-Fi connection, you can get on the same network without radio at all. Now, that might not be pure, but I think that's what that feature is.
Bob has his hand up again, Mike.
Yeah.
Yeah, I might be wrong on this again, but I believe to use a radio in the terminal mode, you actually are connecting to the internet through an Android phone. That ICOM has an app that runs on the Android, not on iOS, and so you connect that way instead of through a hotspot.
Anything else, Tim?
No, I don't see any questions. Brian, do you have any more hands up?
Nope.
All right, so you can wrap it up if you want. And I do have some announcements at the end.
Okay.
Mike,
Yeah.
I'm looking that up right now as we speak. I got my manual out. I'm seeing if it says anything about terminal modes.
Okay. So we showed a little bit about programming, and I don't want to gloss over it because you know, there's a lot to be done there. But for the most part, you can get radio programming software from the manufacturer. In some cases, like Dave RAF's radio, for whatever reason they charge extra for that. And programming of the radios for DSTAR is typically done either using a cable or a memory chip that you plug into the side of the radio. That's how the ID51 is, that there's a memory chip that you plug in and can upload and download the frequencies. And also RT Systems makes programming software and cables for these radios as well. So this website, the location here, I'm going to try to go there and well, that was weird.
It looks like their certificate may have expired, so you can click on advanced and then continue, but just for everyone's safety, just be aware that if you see this kind of thing, you may not want to proceed because it could be a hacked website.
You know, I was there yesterday. I don't know what. Let me just try retyping it in. Maybe it was something underneath the link in the presentation. Yeah, there it is. Okay. So I'm not going to go through this whole thing because there is a whole lot on this website, but it's dstarinfo.com. There are presentations on here, but here you're going to find information about nets, and there's even an HF net on DSTAR. These are reflectors, and there are probably 5 different kinds of reflectors, as well as dozens and dozens of each particular type. The downloads blocks has frequency lists for all of the common radios. So, for example, if I wanted repeater list downloads for DR mode radios, of which all of the current ones pretty much are, you select what area of the country you're in, or the world for that matter, what radio type you have, and it will download a selection of memory locations near you for you to download into your radio. And I'll have to say that the number of hosts out there far exceeds the number of memory locations in the radio, so you're going to have to customize a lot of this stuff for your radio. The maps are pretty helpful. I'm going to select maps by region, and I'm going to select USA Northeast, and it's going to update the map here. And this is a little bit crude because it shows everything in that whole block. This is all of Canada, but there are controls here for you to scroll out and scroll in, and you can localize where you are. So if you're traveling someplace, you can use this to find the repeaters near you. One of the many features we didn't talk about is that the radio has a GPS. So if you properly set your memory in with listings of where the repeaters are located, you can select from the radio, find me something that's close to me. The other site that I want to show is users.org. If I could spell it. Well, I must not have spelled it right. DSTAR. Well, I'm not going to stay on this, but what you can get from dstarusers.org, one of the most important things is there is a last heard list. So if you say, gee, I'm looking for somebody to talk to, you can go to that list and you can get about 5 pages full of who's on, like right now. So we're kind of at the end of radio programming, and I've got
Steve made a note in the chat, if everybody's not reading the chat area, that Nifty EZ for DSTAR is a good
good
reference. Also, he mentioned something about a DSTAR capability for drumlin SIR.
Yeah. Yep, that's something that I've yet to add, but that's in a coming slide. There are probably 3 DSTAR capable repeaters that I didn't put in the slide that I'm going to show, and there's one in Newark, New York, and there's also a DSTAR repeater in the Batavia area, but I don't believe that it is connected to the internet. It would just be good for local contacts. So one thing I wanted to mention kind of briefly is everything we've been talking about is radio based. There are a growing number of solutions, some of them homebrew, that will allow you to talk on the DSTAR network directly from a computer without a radio. And this device is called the Thumb DV, and there's also a newer device like this that's being sold. But this is the DSTAR vocoder that is in a carrier for USB. So there are programs that will allow you to talk on the DSTAR network directly from your computer. And this device, you can plug it into a laptop or a base unit, and you can run the software locally. You can also stick it in a Raspberry Pi and put it on your home network and access it that way. And this, it tells a little bit about it. It's available in a couple of packages. There's a single package, and there's a package with 3 encoders on it. This is the DVSI is the manufacturer who makes the chip that's used inside the radios. And this chip, the modern versions of this chip, the MB encoder, will do DSTAR, DMR, and Fusion as well. This is a program that will use that chip, and you can use this to make calls using the chip on the network. And this has selections for DMR, DSTAR, and Fusion. So you can talk on any of these networks. And this is where you can find information about the chip. I didn't talk about the various types of reflectors, but I'm going to pull up the program that is connected to that chip. And it has a setup where you set up your call sign, your DMR ID. But from this program, I can talk on any of these 3 networks. Right now, I'm set up to talk on DMR or DSTAR. Bob, nod if you have a radio. Bob Moore. Okay, so I'll give him a try. I'm going to call him. I'm already connected to. I'm not connected to, so I'm going to link to Reflector 9 Charlie, which is the one we've been talking about. And it would be more fun if I talked on reflector 30, but we wouldn't be able to get rid of somebody quickly. So I'm going to say link. And this is going to send out over the internet those same commands that we have been sending out over the radio.
Linked REF009C.
So there we just sent the link command out over the internet, and now we're going to switch to CQ. AL7MH, this is KC2NM.
KC2NM, AL7MH. Sound real good, Mike.
Yeah, okay, Bob. Well, thank you for that demonstration, and I'm going to unlink and back to the presentation.
73, AL7MH.
Not linked.
So they're using Blue DV. We just did the same thing that we had done earlier. Oh, okay, we just did it. And these are some links. You know, the question is, what can I do with it? Well, these are mostly on dstarinfo.com. This will maybe answer some of the questions that you might have or get you started, Cedric. And these are some of the area repeaters. This is KB2BZS. These are the two SciArc repeaters that are located in Hemlock. This is one of the Drumlins Group repeaters, and this is W2RIT. One of the repeaters that's missing from this list that I see is KD2HVC, which is a SciArc repeater in Stanley. And Steve, if you want to chime in, who's the fellow in Clyde or Newark?
Steve was having some internet problems. He may not have heard you.
Okay. Well, anyway,
Harry K2ENE has got a question about, is there a software program that just allows the computer and mic, like we're doing here, to connect without any extra hardware? Is there a specific program to link to the DSTAR?
The piece that would be missing there is with DSTAR at present, the vocoder, which is the compression chip that is in all of the radios, has got to be there. It's a chip that you know, people refer to it as proprietary, and I don't think that's true. I think it's not proprietary, but it is sole sourced. It's called the DVSI chip, and with DSTAR, you need to have that chip in order to decode the voice. So the radios come with that chip, and you can buy the USB or Pi-Hat versions, carriers that have that chip, but it's my understanding that for DSTAR, that you have to have something with that chip.
Very good, thank you.
So this is my end, unless there are some questions, or if anybody wants to get back to me with a question, that's fine too. I mean, I'm on the RaRa website.
Yeah, this is KA2ENE, Mike. Yeah, to follow up on what you were talking about there with that chip to do the vocoder, is anybody actually just doing that in software so that no extra hardware is needed? Or is that the proprietary part and it just can't be done without that physical chip?
I don't think it's proprietary, and why it can't be done in software, I don't know. The reason I believe that DVSI is the only one making it is in terms of to redesign that chip and have it built. There's not enough business out there in the ham community, because DSTAR is only ham. There's no application that I'm aware of outside of ham radio. So it's the limited market, I think, is the reason. And why it's not done in software, the only thing I can think of is that it's the capability, but I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
As far as I know,
thanks,
AMB
Mike.
is proprietary.
Is it?
Yeah, this is Brian, KA2CGB. It's used in many different applications, and the U.S. government gets a free license for their applications, but for everybody else, it's commercial.
Thank you. This device, I think, is around $100.
Okay, very good. Yeah, I have the 9700 anyway, but I was just curious about software ways rather than using the radio. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, there are software digital systems that I've read about, but I do not think that DSTAR uses that.
Okay.
All right. If that's the end of the questions, we've gotten a lot of thank yous. Mike, you haven't been able to watch the chat room. A lot of thank yous have come in, and I want to thank you for putting this together and scratching the surface. It is a great class, and I want to thank also Brian, WM2W, and his company, TruePath Technologies, who provided the Zoom format for us today. Upcoming training, DMR, Rich K2AXP will be doing a DMR session similar to this in the next few weeks. So we haven't decided on the exact date. He's kind of pressed. He's doing work and plus trying to put together a presentation. So we will have an email blast like you received for this the week prior to that presentation. Fusion will be covered by Steve, KA1CNF, and that also will be in the next few weeks. It looks like we're not going to have our Parks on the Air Academy like we plan to have an outing due to not being able to gather in groups. So also the RAG will be coming out at the end of this month for May. Please read that for any updates for training. And I have, based on a link to this presentation, I have equipment from an estate. I have a DSTAR Kenwood and a DMR Anytone that are for sale, plus a few other things. I'm going to post those in the chat area here. In fact, I'm posting them right now. No, I went to, let's see, I got to get it to everybody. Okay, and you can contact me if you're interested in acquiring some hardware. Let me see if that posts now. There we go. So it's a long read. If you read your chat, you got that information and my contact information. This session is recorded, and the slides from Mike and when they're updated will be posted by Scott, our webmaster, on the Rochester Academy, rochesterham.org under Academy. So thank you very much for everybody participating. We had, I think, a maximum of 61. Was that right, Brian? 61 participants?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, 61. And thank you all for the nice organized way you presented your questions and muted your microphones. And this is the way we're going to go for the next few months, I imagine, unfortunately. But stay safe. And Mike, watch that cough. I hope you're not running a temp. Gentlemen and ladies, if there's any in there, I didn't see any in there, but to all, thank you very much. And any further comments, chime in.
Yeah, Tim, your listing of the hardware, I think, may have gone to one specific person. I don't see it in the chat.
Oh, I just put it to everyone.
I'm not seeing it.
All right. Well, I'll list it also in the, let's see. Might be too big for that message. I'm not sure. Did you get it now in the chat? I just sent it out.
Yep, I see it now, so everyone should be able to see that as well.
Okay, so there's a DSTAR THD74A with power supply and extra battery, lithium-ion battery, a DMR with charging power supply, an Anytone, and a hotspot, Zumspot, and a HF power supply. These are all in excellent condition. Unfortunately, the ham that got this died in December from leukemia, and he had only been relicensed for about 5 years. So this equipment hardly got used at all. He was in therapy for 2 years. So Bob Kosmicki, if you knew him, a wonderful ham and a great firefighter here in the town of Spencerport. Oh, gentlemen, thank you very much. Anything further?
Thanks, Brian. Thank you, Tim. Good job.
Thank you. And anybody that, I had questions about a tech class that was ongoing. I'm not sure if any of the techs are in here, or if you have friends that, or family that want to become techs. Unfortunately, Larry Hill is an RIT professor, and he has his hands full running 4 classes online and getting his people ready for the end of semester. I'm going to send out an email to the class this week offering my services on one-on-one to tutor them if they want to. I spoke with Don Kaiser, our VE testing, and there is no remote testing at this time. Alaska is the only one that does it. So if you want to go up there, be my guest. But it looks like we probably will not have any testing here locally till possibly at the Rock City Ham Fest in August, if that comes off, or in September when we all get back together, hopefully. So that's what's coming for training. Anybody else? Anybody want to study? You can contact me. I've got extra class books. Well, no, I got to order some new ones because they expired next month. And general class and a lot of technician manuals if people want to study on their own. If you want an extra class book that's expiring, I can give it to you at a great discount. They don't change much, do they, John? So we'll give it to you at a good discount. I want to say hello to my friend Cedric out there in Colorado. We've had people from Colorado, Indiana, Colorado, Maryland, and Florida. So I'm really impressed at these Zoom features that they are really attracting people that could not normally make one of our sessions. So I'm glad this works out for you. Thanks a lot, Don. All right. Thank you again to Brian for hosting this and taking your time. And Mike, thanks for all the time you put in presenting this. You did a great job. A lot of good comments. 73s, I'm leaving the...
Hey, Tim, we should consider having this when we get back in regular person-to-person sessions. We should consider a Zoom presentation with it.
We will, the board is discussing that, and provided we've got a good link that will bandwidth that can handle this from our meetings, we look at doing that. And I'm sure Don, REU, and a few others, George, will work on making this happen, and Scott. So it's a team effort, and the board is not, we are meeting online like this, so we will discuss that. It's in the works there, Dave. Thank you.
All right, well, as the host, I'm going to be stopping the session here in just a moment. So thank you all for attending today. Hope to see you again when we get our DMR infusion sessions scheduled. And just in case anyone didn't catch it in the chat, keep an eye on rochesterham.org for the dates when we get them scheduled, and hope to see you all then. Have a great weekend, folks.
73s.